Now, at this moment in history, in early 2006, we're living in a decidedly dangerous time, because it is quite possible that within the next 2 years, Israel, for example, may decide to attack a country like Iran, possibly with nuclear weapons. And this is not fiction, because we are living in a time of decisive change. There was a whole series of revolutions and wars between about 1912, 1913 and the late 1940s, right across the world. And then the world froze and congealed between two blocs, West and East, Soviet and American. But those blocs have decreased now, and we have a unipolar world dominated by the United States of America and President Bush too. Everything that happens in the world now, because the world has gone global, and this country has gone global, because large sections of the world, including people we used to rule in our own empire, have come to live here, means that all is interconnected. And these wars, which are ravaging parts of the planet, and large population movements which ensue as a consequence, directly affect us here. They affect people here in Huddersfield and elsewhere. There's no getting away from this. Now, Iran has just elected a new president, and he says that Israel should be destroyed. And they are halfway, 45% maybe, through the development of a full-scale nuclear program, allegedly for civil uses. All countries get the civil power first, and as a side product for getting the weapons. Iraq proved, when it didn't have weapons of mass destruction, that if you want to avoid being attacked by the United States and certain ruling interests in the United States, you better well have weapons of mass destruction. And make no bones about it, that a tipping point in many respects is coming. Historical predictions are difficult, but if Iran is attacked, and they have their nuclear industry hidden under mountains and in 15 sites across the Republic of Iran, there will be devastation in that society of around 30 million plus if mass hits on their installations occur. There is also the danger of nuclear explosions above and below ground if the Americans go in or if that attack is subcontracted to Israel. And people have to understand that there will be consequences here for us and for the whole of the West, and for the rest of the world if this takes place. We had a third of our army in southern Iraq until just recently. Tony Blair doesn't control the streets in South London on Friday and Saturday night, and yet a third of our army is inside Iraq. And we have allowed the Iranians, by proxy, to come to power in Iraq. The coalition that was elected just recently under Western guns in Iraq is ruled by a party called SCIRI, which means the Islamic Revolution in Iraq. Iranian interests now percolate through that society, and technology given to militants in the south by the Revolutionary Guard in Iran has killed over 100 of our troops already. And we've had it easy in the south because they have come to power and we have largely let them do what they want. The group that's in southern Iraq and in Iran are called Shias, and they're 10% of the Islamic community worldwide. But if Iran is attacked by the West, we will have had war after war after war. Afghanistan first, Iraq second, Iran, because you won't be able to say it's not a war, because it is, third. And other attacks all over the world. And more, the situation, globally and nationally, is radicalizing. The president just elected of Iran has promised suicide bombers in every Western city that participates, directly or indirectly, in any attack upon his republic. If the Israelis attack Iran, they will overfly Iraq and they will overfly southern Iraq, where our troops are presently ostracized by the local councils there because a few native lads were giving a beating because they've been throwing bricks and Molotov cocktails at our men for over a day. We are involved, whether we like it or not. 50% of our people opposed these foreign and essentially American-led adventures. They are not particularly in our interest. But the crucial point to remember for us is that there are large communities living here now who are loyal to other nations and other forms of conceptuality that are alien to our people, that stretch right across the world, that are here in our midst, will not tolerate their societies as they perceive it being attacked abroad, and they will bring these conflicts back home and have already done so. One has to understand that when the bus and tube bombings occurred just recently in the centre of London, they were marginal efforts by fringe gangs who were self-motivated and engaged in terrorism in accordance with what's called leaderless resistance, where small cells come together, usually under an older man or an elder statesman in a given community. If a state, which feels aggrieved, puts its muscle and its security services behind such networks, they will mushroom 20, 100, and 1,000-fold. What has been amateurish in the past, involving networks of lads radicalised in fringe mosques and other institutions, even outside the mainstream of their own community, will become larger, more pervasive, more decisive, and more integrated into minority life, facing out against the rest of us here. And it can't be avoided, because what liberalism has done in the last 50 years is to bring all of the conflicts on the earth into our own society. Many of the ethnic minorities are completely divided amongst themselves. All the Indian subcontinental groups, for the most part, committed communal genocide against each other in 1948, when the Raj, our empire in India, came to an end. But they are other from that which we are. And in a strange sort of way, militant Islam has become the face of that which is other in relation to our people and in this society as well as others. In France recently, the suburbs around Paris and other cities were ablaze because youth from the Third World was rioting against the white man, rioting against the West, rioting against the French language, rioting against French intervention in Algeria, rioting against Western civilization and the culture that it has created. French politicians run around. They demonise a politician called Le Pen who wishes to do something about it, and whose support rating is now 20% of the polls. 20%. 5 million French people voted for him in the second round of the last Fifth Republic presidential elections to be president. There was no centre, there was no left in that election. It was moderate right, Chirac, a corrupt, old-time, godless politician, and radical right. The left and the centre have gone, and the French are arguing amongst themselves about what sort of society they should have. Do you have a global society with micro groups within it that have no allegiance to your state or to your nationality because they are not of your ethnicity? And they can't be parlayed out of the way because people are what they are through blood and genetics. This is why debate and cutting the difference and doing a deal only really works. Our type of old politics, Tory, Labour, with the Liberals in the middle, only works when people actually agree to disagree in a reasonably civilised manner, because ultimately they're the same people, the same culture, the same ethnicity, the same race. They have the same stories, the same national mythologies. They even understand each other when they're lying to each other. But when you are totally different and you are totally distinct, and you are living in the same society, you have internalized various conflicts all over the world, many of which have nothing to do with us, here, now, in our streets. I remember walking up and down the Oxford Road, which is the university district in Manchester, about 25 years ago, and various Iranian groups were screaming at each other. Technically, there were a group called the Mujahideen, and those that supported the revolution that had just taken place. And the Greater Manchester Police, the GMP, were pushing them apart, arresting the odd one, taking them to the vans, and so on. And it ran through my mind, why are they here? What has this got to do with Lancashire? What has this got to do with our people here and now? And tens of thousands and millions of these people have come here seeking work, seeking employment, seeking opportunity, because a third of humanity lives in misery. A third of humanity lives between misery and a good lunch. A third of humanity is all right. And in much of the Third World, many are dying. But some of the more active and aggressive and purposeful ones are coming here because they see that the party is here and they want in. And the liberal, capitalist and globalist economy is sucking them in here to do cheap jobs, to run a 24-hour economy based upon £1 trillion worth of debt. And they are coming here, first generation, second generation, third generation. And they're beginning to look at us and look at our softness. Look at the decadence of this society. Look at the collapse of its spirituality and religiosity. Look at its miseducation and undereducation. How many of our youth even know who they are, even know any of our history, much of our literature, much of our art, much of our sculpture, much of what we have achieved? I was in Trafalgar Square recently, which is the hub of an enormous city that once ruled between a quarter and a fifth of the earth. And I looked around. There's Nelson's Column, which was designed by somebody called Bailey, at least the sculpture at the top, and Railton designed the column. And there are lions on either side, equidistant with that column. And they were designed by a 19th century artist called Landseer. And there's the National Gallery there. And there's the South African Embassy there. South Africa used to be a civilised, white-run society. The murder rate in South Africa is now 30,000 a year, black on black. It is the rape capital of the world. A third of all mothers who are pregnant have AIDS. This is what has happened. And over their embassy flies a flag that looks suspiciously like a wyvern, and that's the new South African flag, the flag of Azania, because that particular outcropping of our empire has gone, my friends, and it will not come back. It's gone forever, and as a warning to others. On the other side of the square, and this is in the centre of our ruling city, near our governmental districts, there's the Canadian embassy. Now, there are two statues at either end of that square, and they are of imperial heroes. Tens of thousands of people of every race and of every kind and of every culture and of every spirituality pass these sculptures every day. Millions of our people have been through this square at one time or another. Hardly anyone probably knows who they represent. They represent two leaders. Sir Charles Napier was one of them, who destroyed the Indian Mutiny in the middle of the 19th century, when our empire rocked in India. And they punished those who mutineered against us by strapping their bodies to cannons and blowing them up before galleries of white people who were put there for that purpose to watch. We were not as soft then as we are now. Palmerston, who was then the leader of the Liberal Party, said that Britain was an empire that had been given by God's hand to rule the earth, and that if foreigners annoyed us, we would beat them about the head with a stick. This man was the leader of the Liberal Party in the 19th century. Come forward and do something, as our forebears did before. Listen to our music, read our literature, speak our languages, worship our gods, be loyal to our military traditions, vote for, join, belong to, stand for, and go forwards with this political party. I give you the British National Party. Thank you very much.